The air shimmered with the buzz of celebrity and flash photography. The carpet beneath their feet gleamed a deep, commanding red, laid out like a symbol of admiration. Cameras clicked with relentless speed, reporters called out names, and all eyes turned as Shante Broadus and her husband Snoop Dogg stepped into view. Dressed in an elegant ivory gown, Shante moved with grace, her hand resting lightly in Snoop's. Their entrance turned heads, not only for the music legend's signature charisma, but for the quiet power of the woman beside him. She didn't seek the spotlight, but she carried it with her. A host, known for his loud jokes and viral stunts, spotted them approaching. He grinned wide, microphone in hand, and swaggered toward the couple. As the cameras turned his way, he raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Yo, Snoop! Man, you brought your mom tonight." Laughter followed, sharp and instant. Shante froze. Her smile, perfectly measured just seconds ago, wavered. The host didn't stop. "Or is that your manager now?" "Either way, that's some serious vintage glam right there." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the crowd. Some laughed harder, others looked away, unsure. Snoop chuckled, reflexively perhaps, before realizing what had just been said. He turned slowly to look at his wife. Shante's face hadn't changed. Still, composed. But her eyes were different, dimmed. What had started as a night of celebration had turned sour in an instant, and she stood in its center, humiliated. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that shine a light on what really matters. There had been no warning, no chance to deflect, to shield her. The host moved on quickly, already spotting his next target. But the sting of his words lingered, heavier with each second. The couple continued forward. Snoop's hand remained on hers, but his steps had lost their swagger. Shante remained silent, offering polite nods and brief smiles, but her energy had shifted. Those close enough to catch the moment could feel the change. Inside the venue, lights dimmed as the event began, yet Snoop and Shante barely registered the booming voices on stage. The applause, the cheers, it all faded. She sat beside her husband, upright and proud, but something in her posture said everything. For years, Shante Broadus had been a steady figure behind the scenes. While Snoop rose to international fame, became an icon in music, business, and media, she remained the silent strength. She rarely gave interviews. She didn't chase attention. Her loyalty was never up for debate. She had endured headlines, rumors, and the heavy cost of loving a man the world claimed as its own. Yet she never asked for credit. All she wanted, perhaps, was respect. But on that night, under that spotlight, in front of those cameras, she had become the punchline. Backstage, away from the noise, Snoop glanced at her as they waited for their cue to reappear. He tried to smile, to lighten the mood. "You good?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Then, barely audibly, she said, "I'm tired, Calvin." He knew what she meant. Not just tired from tonight, but tired of always being the one who had to carry it. The weight, the silence, the jokes. And suddenly, his laughter from earlier echoed louder in his own ears than the crowds ever could. The limousine ride home was silent. The city lights passed in blurred streaks across the window, but Shante kept her gaze forward, unmoved. Snoop sat beside her, fingers tapping absently on his knee, searching for words he hadn't yet found. At home, the silence followed them through the door. He watched her walk ahead, graceful but distant, like someone trying to hold themselves together one step at a time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but her words cut deep. "You laughed." He exhaled, the weight of guilt pressing down hard. "I didn't mean to, it caught me off guard. I thought..." "You thought it was funny." "No," he said quickly. "I thought it was stupid, but I didn't say anything. That's on me." She didn't reply. Instead, she moved to the kitchen, poured a glass of water and leaned on the counter. For a long moment, she didn't look at him. Then she turned. "I've been through this with you before, the rumors, the interviews, the late nights. I never complained because I knew what I signed up for. But being disrespected in public like I'm just some stranger next to you, that's different." Her words didn't rise in volume, but their truth did. He nodded slowly, not because it eased the blow, but because he knew she was right. He sat down on the edge of the couch, eyes low. "You don't deserve that. Not from him, not from me." Her eyes softened a little, but her body remained tense. "I've spent decades protecting your image, Calvin. But who protects mine?" The question stayed in the air between them, unanswered, heavy. Later that night, long after she had gone upstairs, he sat alone in the den. The host's words replayed in his mind like a loop he couldn't turn off. But worse than that was his own laugh, the automatic chuckle that had betrayed her. On social media, the moment had already gone viral. Clips of the red carpet incident were circulating fast. Tweets and comments exploded across platforms. Some fans expressed outrage, defending Shante's dignity. Others turned it into memes, laughing at her expense. The longer he scrolled, the deeper the ache grew. He knew the cost of fame. He'd watched it chew people up for years. But now, that cost had reached the one person he had always promised to protect. Even his fans were asking, "Why didn't you say something? Why did you laugh?" He had no answer that would satisfy them, because the truth was, he hadn't thought quickly enough, hadn't reacted like a man who understood his own power. And now, his silence felt louder than anything he'd ever rapped on a mic. In the days that followed, Shante stayed out of sight. She skipped events, ignored invitations, and declined interviews. For once, she wasn't standing next to him at shows or galas. Her absence was quiet but deafening. One evening, he passed by the hallway and saw her in the study, flipping through old photo albums. Their children, their wedding, tour life, birthdays, all frozen in time. She didn't notice him watching, or maybe she did, but chose not to say anything. For years she had been his constant, his peace in chaos. But now something had shifted, not because of a joke, but because of what followed it, or rather, what didn't. And as her silence stretched from hours into days, Snoop began to wonder whether this wound would heal, or whether it had reopened something deeper, something long buried beneath years of loyalty. The studio was dimly lit, a haze of creativity floating in the air. Snoop sat in the recording booth, headphones snug over his ears, a beat thumping low in the background. He tried to focus, to lose himself in the rhythm the way he always had, but something was off. Bars came and went, nothing stuck. Then, without planning it, a line escaped his mouth, sharp, personal, heavy with emotion. "Her queen beside me," they laughed like she was nothing. I smiled with them. "Man, that was disgusting." He paused. The words hung in the air like smoke. His producer looked through the glass window, eyebrows raised. "You sure you want to say that?" Snoop pulled the headphones off. "It's what it is." The rest of the session was quiet. When he got home, the house was still. Shante was upstairs, the door to their bedroom closed. He walked into his office and sat down with a pen and a blank sheet of paper, not for lyrics this time, but for something else. He began to write. "Dear Shante, I've said a lot of things in my life, millions of words in songs, on stages, in interviews, but I've never said enough about you. I've let the world think I'm always in control. But I was wrong last night, and you paid for it." The letter grew from there, lines of apology, of recognition, of deep reflection. He told her she was more than his partner. She was his mirror, his protector, his truth, and he had failed her in front of everyone. He left the note on her side of the bed. The next morning she read it, said nothing. But when she poured his coffee, she placed it gently in front of him, a silent sign that the words had reached her. Still, the world outside hadn't quieted. Online, voices grew louder. Some attacked the host, calling for apologies. Others questioned why Snoop hadn't spoken up sooner. The joke, the silence, the clip, it had become a conversation about more than just one moment. It was about how women like Shante, strong, loyal, ever-present, were often treated as background figures in the stories of powerful men. He knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. The following day, he was invited to a podcast interview. It was supposed to be a typical press stop, promotion for a new single, but as the mics turned on and the questions started, he took a breath and interrupted. "I want to speak on something real quick," he said. "What happened the other night wasn't cool. Not just the joke, but the fact that I laughed. That's not the man I want to be. That's not the partner my wife deserves." The hosts fell quiet. Snoop continued. People think strength is silence, but sometimes silence is cowardice, and I was a coward for not checking that disrespect in the moment. I want to say this clear. That woman's been with me from the start, and she's never asked for fame, just respect. The clip spread like wildfire. Social media shifted. Celebrities reposted his statement, some adding their own stories about partners being overlooked or insulted. Women shared posts about the unseen labor of love and loyalty. The phrase "she stood behind him for years" became a banner under which many identified. For the first time in a long while, the narrative wasn't about Snoop, it was about her. And though Shante hadn't spoken publicly yet, something had changed in the air. People were listening finally. The host's apology came 2 days later. A short video, posted to his social media, filled with cliches and rehearsed remorse. "I didn't mean any harm. It was just a joke. I respect all women, especially strong ones like Shante." But the public wasn't buying it. Comments flooded in, calling him out for sidestepping accountability. He had mocked a woman publicly. His apology shouldn't be a PR move. Meanwhile, a popular daytime show reached out to Shante with an invitation to speak. At first, she hesitated. She had never sought a platform, never wanted attention. But after rereading Snoop's letter and witnessing the wave of women sharing their own stories, she made her decision. The studio lights were bright, but she stood in them with quiet power. Wearing a simple navy suit, no embellishments, she looked straight into the host's eyes and spoke. "I've never been one to chase microphones. I don't speak often, but when I do, I speak for more than just myself." Her voice was calm, steady, but behind it was a firm, unshakable presence. We live in a world that celebrates men who rise from nothing. And I've watched that rise right next to my husband for decades, but too often, the women who hold them up are treated like shadows, jokes, afterthoughts. The audience fell silent. I'm not angry. I've learned that anger gives power to people who don't deserve it. But I am disappointed, not just in that moment, but in what it says about how we view loyalty, age, presence. I've been many things in my life, a mother, a partner, a businesswoman, and I'm proud of all of them. She paused, looked at the crowd. I'm not here to demand respect. I'm here to remind people that it shouldn't need to be demanded in the first place. The applause rose slowly, then surged. Halfway through the broadcast, Snoop appeared unannounced, flowers in hand. The audience gasped. Shante blinked, surprised, but didn't move. He walked to her and took her hand gently. "I ain't come here as a rapper. I'm here as a man who got it wrong. She's been my queen since day one, and queens deserve crowns, not criticism." There was no performance in his tone, just sincerity. Later, back at home, Shante sat on the patio, watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages, friends, family, strangers thanking her for what she said. On Twitter, a hashtag exploded, "Respect Shante." It trended for hours. Women of all ages posted stories of standing in the background, of being strong in silence. Men added their voices too, recognizing moments when they'd failed to speak up. News outlets picked up the story. Think pieces poured in about public dignity, the value of women who choose to stand beside men in the spotlight, but remain unsung. Shante's name became more than just Snoop Dogg's wife. She had become a symbol of grace under fire. In interviews over the next few days, Snoop was asked repeatedly about the incident. He didn't deflect. He didn't excuse. He leaned in. "I've lived a long life in front of cameras, but I never looked past the one person who's always seen me for who I really am. I just forgot to make sure the world saw her too." That honesty struck a chord. For Shante, it wasn't about being vindicated. It wasn't even about the apology. It was about finally feeling visible, not as an accessory, not as an extension of someone else's story, but as herself. And in that simple recognition, the wound began to close. They left Los Angeles for a while. No press releases, no fanfare, just a quiet departure to breathe, reflect, and reconnect. In the soft rhythm of places untouched by flashing cameras, Shante and Snoop rediscovered the peace they hadn't realized they were missing. They talked more, laughed without audience, took long walks. Not as celebrities or figures in headlines, but as two people who had lived an entire lifetime together. In those days away, healing wasn't forced. It was natural, mutual, and something new took root. One evening, over dinner by a quiet lake, Shante looked at him and said, "You know, I don't want the world to remember me as someone who was insulted and defended. I want them to know what I stand for. What I believe in." Snoop nodded. "Then let's show 'em." From that moment, an idea was born. Together, they began developing a foundation, a space for women in entertainment who work behind the scenes, who build empires in silence, who guide without needing applause. The mission was simple: visibility, dignity, respect. When they returned to LA, they launched it quietly. No red carpet, no spotlight. But the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Stories followed. Women who had been agents, managers, writers, caretakers, finally given a voice. In the weeks that followed, interviews with Snoop took a different tone. Gone was the usual bravado. Instead, he spoke openly about loyalty, about being a better partner, about growth. "I spent years thinking the world owed me something," he told one reporter. "Turns out I owed the world something better, and that started with how I treat the woman who's been down with me from the jump." He wasn't reinventing himself. He was remembering who he had always been underneath the noise. For Shante, there were no public speeches, no media tours. Her work happened off camera, in mentorship meetings, in quiet emails of encouragement, in programs designed to support women who were used to being overlooked. She had become a beacon, not because she demanded it, but because her quiet strength spoke louder than words. At home, their dynamic shifted, not in dramatic gestures, but in small, consistent changes. He listened more. She smiled more. They moved in rhythm, as partners who had faced a storm and chosen to rebuild stronger. One night, Snoop posted a message on his social media, simple, reflective. "There's fame, and then there's family. Only one of those really matters, and I'm blessed to still hold both." The post went viral again, but this time it wasn't for drama or scandal. It was for truth. People don't always remember headlines, but they remember what made them feel something. And this story, of a woman who stood tall and a man who finally saw her fully, left a mark far beyond the moment. The world kept moving, as it always does. But somewhere in that motion, thousands of people saw their own relationships differently. They paused before laughing at a cruel joke. They noticed the quiet strength beside them. They apologized, they changed, and in the echo of one night's disrespect, a legacy of respect began to rise. If this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life narratives that challenge, inspire, and uplift. And don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen to dive into another powerful journey. Trust us, you won't want to miss what comes next.